All right, so this week we pick up with verse 7 of vaYiqra, chapter 23. That's Leviticus. So I'm going to, as usual, start with the previous verse, reminder of where we are. Verse 6, my translation. On the 15th day of this new moon will be the feast of Matzot, which is, of course, is unleavened bread, to Yahweh. They shall eat unleavened bread for 7 days. Matzot really just means leaven, and it's in plural, of course. Matzah is singular, matzot plural. But we say unleavened bread because it actually says lechem, they shall eat matzot lechem, unleavened bread. So that's why it's called unleavened bread, even though they don't really call it that very often. They just call it the unleavening. It's really the feast of matzot. We don't say feast of unleavened bread. Generally, we call it matzot, which is just leaven. I don't know why I thought I needed to tell you that, but I did. Okay, so we're going to kick off with verse 7. Very, very literal translation here. In day the first convocation holy, he will be to you. All work service, not you shall make they. That's actually pretty easy to follow, right? And you realize that we're in the middle of a sentence that has been broken up. So all of this previous verse and even the verse before that are all probably the same verse in Hebrew. They get broken up. They were broken up later. They were not broken. We did not have chapters and verses when this stuff was written. That comes even after the time of the Second Temple. Yeshua had come and gone. We still didn't have chapter and verse for anything. That's a later development. But so since we, English speakers in particular, have this aversion to long-winded sentences, what we call run-on sentences, a sentence in Hebrew did not have that aversion. You wrote a sentence until you got the whole point across, and that sentence could be as long as 2 paragraphs, 3 paragraphs. It made no difference how long the sentence was. But, of course, in English, then we break them up. Well, then people start taking these parts and pieces of a sentence and making new doctrines by taking that part of a sentence and making it stand on its own. That's why it's important for us to understand that these are broken up sentences. Just because they have a verse number does not mean it's a new sentence. In fact, most of the time, well, a great deal of the time, it's not going to be a new sentence. Anyway, so we start off with ba yom, yom being the word for day, and ba, so it's in the day. In this case, it's going to be in the day, because the bait sound added to the front of a word can be in or with. Generally, you can WITH, with, or the word in. It can be used either way, though in Hebrew, those are exactly the same thing. We just have to use different words in English because we're a more literal language. We use more words than biblical Hebrew does. So anyway, you guys should know that by now. So we start off with in the day, and then it says ha-rishon, rosh, head, beginning. So it gets translated as beginning, Bereshit, that's rosh in the beginning, if you will. And in this case, it's the same word, just the differences in the sounds of the vowels just indicates plurality, tense, gender, things like that. So the words can sound like different words to us, but they're not. They're the same word. So in this case, we're going to translate it as first, because in the beginning of this day, at the beginning, well, it has the ha at the beginning. So it would be in beginning this day. So you can see why in the first day is usually how that's translated. Then it says Mikra Kodesh. Now, we've had this an awful lot. It's going to come up an awful lot more. I would like you to think of this kind of as a single word, Mikra Kodesh. We call it a holy meeting or a holy convocation. Because it's the calling together, it's having an assembly. And on this first one, of course, it's going to be a Shabbat. Now, is this year, for instance, Shavuot, right? That's one coming up. It's going to happen. The convocation happens on Tuesday, just as the sun's going down. So the convocation could be either Tuesday. You start it just before the sun goes down, so that the convocation goes through the setting of the sun, and then you've had that holy convocation on the first day. Or you could wait until Wednesday and have it during the day, which has always been an issue for us because not everybody can. For people who are new to this, they usually are working on these days. They haven't gotten far enough along to where they can be off on the days they're supposed to be off. And we don't want them to miss out. So we start in the evening of the day before, but make sure the sun goes down so that the convocation ends on that next day. And that is well within the convocation being on the correct day. But this is just a holy meeting, and it becomes a Sabbath. So Sabbath does not just happen on Saturday. Sabbath happens when we have these Mikra Kodesh, these holy convocations. Then it says, Yiyeh, it will be Lachem, which sounds an awful lot like lechem, bread. Sound alike words, but this is to you. Kol, which is the word for all, A-L-L, everything, don't leave anything out. Then it says melechet. Okay, this is our word for work. This occupation would probably be a better word for that. In fact, I think that's what I used in the translation as well, is occupation. This is the day that you do not do your occupation, which can be confusing because you're thinking, well, can I do someone else's? We'll get to that. So this is the work. It's service. It's work that's prescribed to anyone. It's the work of an artisan. In other words, the making of something in some way. It's from the root la'ach, which is really for walking. It's to send a messenger. Shalachim, shalach, to send. That word comes from this same. But in this case, it would be to send someone to minister to someone, to go to work. But see, this word is followed by to do sacred work, working in the temple, stuff like that. It's of service, of servitude. It's where we get the word for. It's generally translated as slave, which back when it was translated as slave in English would have been fine. But using that word today kind of gives the wrong idea, because they think that slavery in the Bible was like slavery in early American experience, and it's not. Because it's of service. It's of somebody who's actually paid for their service in some way, whether it's instead of cash, you get housing. Well, if you're Jewish if you're Jewish and you're hiring someone, and you're Jewish being hired by someone, technically you're supposed to get a salary, a house to live in, clothes to wear, food to eat. All of that's supposed to be part of the deal. Yes, including a salary. And those are the ones that are called slaves. Throwing that out there for you. So we have these two words put together are going to give us a very specific meaning, which we will get into, but not just yet. Then it says lo, so not, you will not, ta'asu, you will not do it. And even ta'asu, that's of the idea of lifting up when talking about the ark that Noah built and put all the animals in, it says that the waters came in and lifted asa, lifted up the ark. So this is but it's of labor. It's to work, to manufacture, to produce. So you're getting three different words that essentially are meaning the same thing. Are you starting to pick up on some importance here? So you say, I think that's the last word. Let me make sure. Yeah, pretty short sentence, or part of a sentence. So in the first day, you will, and I put in squiggly letters so that I'm adding some English words here to help make the sentence make sense. In the first day, you will participate in Mikra Kodesh, a holy meeting. You will not perform any melacha avodah. You won't perform any occupational labor. Are you seeing the difference between you won't perform your occupation and you won't perform any occupational labor? The Rashi, the Sa'adiya, Sifra, all argued that the word melacha indicated that one must refrain from work even if there is financial loss. Well, if you're not working, you're probably not getting paid. I mean, if you can set it up to where you're getting your, you're following taking these days off when you have the paid vacation, if you can use that, then that works out. You wind up getting paid on those days, but you didn't do the labor. As long as you're not working, you can get paid for not being there. That is perfectly fine because you're not breaking the law by that. Okay, I guess I'm gonna talk about this idea of the two words because the sages really messed this up, and I want to, at some point, I'm going to get to that. I think it's going to be a little later in the teaching, though. I mean, later in the chapter. All right, so we're moving to verse 8. It says, and bring you burnt offerings to Yahweh 7 days in day, the seventh, convocation holy, all work service, not you shall make they. So we've already gone through this earlier piece saying that in the first day, there's a holy convocation. And now, of course, it just said in the seventh day, there will be one. Okay, so we have vaYiqra Tim. And literally you would say, and make draw near when he aids the afflicted. People are said to draw near to God who worship him, and so on. If you're coming from this place to over there, you're drawing near to that place, right? So it's pretty straightforward. Then we have the word isheh, which I'm translating as burnt offering here because that's literally what this is talking about. It's a sacrifice, so-called from the fire by which sacrifice. So calling it a burnt offering, I think, makes more sense. Then it says La Yahweh. So it's saying that this sacrifice is either to Yahweh or for Yahweh. See, in Hebrew, to and T-O Yahweh or F-O-R Yahweh are exactly the same thing. We use the different words to make the sentences a little better, easier to understand in it. But it doesn't matter if one person says to Yahweh and another person translate it for Yahweh. It's exactly the proper name of God. Okay, now the next word is Shivat, which is plural, so it's days, D-A-Y-S, days. And I'll mention here, because I probably haven't said it in a while, but a day in biblical Hebrew is not the same thing as we think of as what a day means in English. A day in Hebrew can be 4 eternities back to back. There's no requirement for a day to be a 24-hour period. And let me give you an example. How about the day they were in the wilderness? Well, that was 40 years. The day they were in captivity, speaking of Egypt, that's 430 years. And it's called a day. Look it up. It'll say day right there in your English Christian Bibles. It'll still say day. So you understand that a day, though it can be a 24-hour period, is not required to be a 24-hour period, because it's not of a 24-hour period. It's of a period of time. So 24 hours is a period of time, just like hundreds of billions, hundreds of trillions, hundreds of whatever comes beyond that years can be called a single day in Hebrew. So the idea that God created all that we know, this planet, in 6 literal 24-hour day periods is stupid. It is not biblical. It is not right. And those of you who are running around on the interwebs saying otherwise need to get educated. You don't even know what you're talking about. Besides, you have a problem here. You don't get the sun and the moon until day 4. So how did you have the first 3 days? It's nonsensical. All right. So first we have 7 days then it says Bayom. Now this is in day. We're going back to a singular day. Ha Shevi'i, so in the 7th day. That's the word for Shevi'i is 7. Mikra Kodesh. So here you're going to have your holy meeting, your holy convocation. Yeah, I'm sure there's other things it's called. Then it says Kol, which is everything included here. Melechet, here's your word for work. That first one that we talked about. What was the word I used? No. Occupation. Yeah, so I really think we should think of that word as occupation. It makes a lot more sense. But then that's followed by avodah. So we still have the 2 words being used together. Where the sages get confused is when they start leaving avodah off. And then they begin to think, oh, see, that's something totally different. No, it's not. There are Hebrew grammar rules that that need to be applied. So this is lo ta'asu, same word. You're not going to, this is the other word for produce, manufacture, and all that. But it's of lifting up. You're not going to lift a finger to work, right? You're not going to do, because it can be translated as the word do. You're not going to do any work on those days. No occupational labor can be done on those days. None. All right, so your translation. And you will bring Isheh, so you'll bring fire offerings to Yahweh for 7 days. And on the 7th day, and I've had to add, you will participate in a Mikra Kodesh, a holy meeting. You will not perform any occupational labor. The details concerning the sacrifices made during the feasts of God are laid out in Bamidbar, chapter 28, verses 19 through 24. So this is what we're going through so far in this chapter is a summation. It's maybe even an overview. You could look at it either way. It's just a summing up of these are, because remember we started off, these are the appointed times of God. So you're not getting here the details of how these sacrifices are supposed to be made and all that, but we've already we've actually already been through a lot of it, but they're also going to come up in Numbers chapter 28, verses 19 through 24. At least that's a note that I picked up from somewhere. I don't remember where that came from. I usually tell myself these things, where I got them, but I totally forgot where I got that piece of information. Anyway, all right, so that's how I put that. We're going to, I hate to say topic, but basically it's like some bullet points that are, because it's not changing here. We're still talking about the feast of Yahweh, but there's going to be like this bullet point, like indented portion. So we're going to it's going to change a little bit. And how do I know? Well, because the Hebrew says, "Vayedaber Yahweh el Moshe lemor." And if any of you have heard me talk for any length of time, you know that means, and Yahweh spoke to Moshe, saying. So this is how we know that there is a sub-subject. Is that okay? A subtopic to the subject. I think I like that. Can we remember that some way? Okay, so we're going to move on to verse 10. Speak to the children of Israel and say you to them, for shall go they to the land that I give to you, reap, harvest, and bring, because it's make come. So bring you, Omer, beginning harvest, you all, so you in plural, to the Kohen. So we start off with daber, and that's speak. That's the setting in a row, ranging in order, being. You gotta put this in a way that people can follow your instructions, because these are the instructions that are going to lead them into doing these things properly, and maybe even understanding why. Although that would be a different word. Amar would be more about understanding, where daber is more about words that lead you, right? I hope I've said enough about the difference between these two words that you guys can follow that. So we have dabar, then it's el, which is to, speak to. Then it says b'nai Yisrael, speak to the children of Israel. Ve'amarta, see, this is where we change up. So you're going to arrange these words in an order. You're going to make sure that they're easy to understand. And now you're going to make it understandable. Because you can think about it. Have you ever had a medical doctor try to tell you something about your medical condition, and then you have to say, "Doc, can you say that in normal people verbiage?" The doctor has spoken to you. Now you need the doctor to bring it to light. You need the doctor to shed light on this subject. You need the doctor to help you to understand what the doctor just said. That's really the difference between these two words. And then it says alehem, so speak to make it understandable to them. Ki tavo'u, so ki is if, for, because. You can always tell by the way the sentence pans out which of those three you should pick. It's always, I've never known it not to be clear. It stands out, right? So we don't have to worry about that right now. But it's ta vo'u. That's from the root word bo. So it's to come, to enter, to arrive in a city. But it's also to go. In order for you to arrive in a city, you had to go from one place to that place, right? So bo is actually used for to come and to go. Again, The structure of the sentence will lead us to know which way we should understand it. Of course, it helps if you know that this is in he fil, which is a Hebrew grammar thing that very few people understand. But then it says el, which is Theo, el haaretz. So to the land, and that's all it means, to the land. Aretz can be dirt, soil, land. It's used of earth. It's even used of the whole globe. It's almost always land. We should almost always first think of it as the word for land, L-A-N-D, land. Asher ani noten, that I give, that I give. And it's to cause to receive. It's, the old story I like to tell every once in a while of a man asking my wife and I out to dinner, and he was telling us that he was going to make this big donation to what we do. And he opened up this camera box thingy he had, obviously there used to be a camera in it, but it was full of money, lots of money. And he said, I'm not going to give it to you right now. I'll give it to you, tomorrow or the next day or whatever it was. But we never received it. So he forgot the part on giving in the cause to receive part. If he just handed it to us in that moment, he would have caused us to receive. Still waiting on him to cause us to receive that. But give is more than, a lot of people will tell you, oh yeah, I'll give you this and I'll do this and I'll do that. And then when the time comes, nothing happens. They didn't cause you to receive. So a lot of people like to hear themselves say things like that. And they mean it in the moment, but they very quickly forget that they've told someone that they will do something. And sometimes it's because you never understood it. All right, so lechem, to you. And then it's uke zartem, which is actually to shorten. But it's to cut off, and they're generally talking about grain. So we're talking about reap. You're reaping a harvest. And then it says et get zia. Well, that is the word for harvest. So reap a harvest. Pretty straightforward. Va havetem. And that's that word for and make come. You make come, and make come you, very literally. So it's you bring. You bring. Et omer. That's a sheaf, a bundle. It's a measure of dry things containing the 10th part of an ephah. Or ephah, as I think most people say it. Ephah is how you actually pronounce it. That one's a little harder to figure out because the units of measurement are long lost to Judaism. But, you're supposed to bring a bundle of something. And in this case, it's your harvest. Did it say wheat harvest? No. Did it grain harvest? No. It just said your harvest. It's a bundle. This is Roshit. So remember, that's Rosh. It's beginning. It's the first. In this case, it'd be the first. Kezechem, the first of your harvest. So let's say your harvest is, you have an orchard. So you got to think of a bundle as, like a basket maybe, or a gunny sack with apples in it or something. Your bundle is not going to be like understand that just because we're using words that would be more particular in English doesn't mean that's what they mean in Hebrew. So it's the first part of whatever it is that you harvest. Now, okay, Rob, I'm not a farmer, so I don't have to do this. Oh, Yeah, you do. Because let's say you're an attorney and you charge by the hour. Or when you get paid, you've just reaped your harvest. Follow? Because that's what you plant. Okay, so here's my translation of verse 10. Speak to the Bnei Yisrael, speak to the children of Israel, and say to them, when you enter the land which I give you and reap a harvest, you will bring the et omer reshit kezir, the first sheaf of your harvest, to the Kohen, to the priest, not to the Kohanim, not to all of them. You're going to bring them to the priest. So probably there's going to be a priest that maybe you're assigned to, like they used to do, or the priest who is working at the moment that you get there. That's kind of how you got assigned to it. That would be the person that you're going to bring it to. So let's talk about Omer, the word sheep. According to Shemot, or Exodus 16:18 and 16:36, an Omer is measured out at 1/10 of an ephah. I personally have read that 1/10 of an ephah is equal to 2 liters, or the approximate mass of 43 eggs. Okay. All of that comes 1,000 years or more after the time of the Second Temple. And let me remind you, this stuff was written and being presented to the children of Israel 1,500 years before that. So the likelihood that that amount is right is not very likely. Let's just say 0 to none. This is something somebody made up. They don't know. Because a sheaf of wheat to weigh as much as 43 eggs, yeah, I don't know about that. Maybe. But we honestly don't know. Okay. So now we're going to look. Well, I have not been watching. Okay, we're doing fine on time. So now we're going to look at verse 11. Very literal translation. And make wave the Omer to faces Yahweh to pleasure your, from tomorrow, the Shabbat, he wave us the Kohen. Wow, he's going to have to wave us. So we start off with vet hanif, and that's to make something wave. It's not just to wave, but it's to make it wave. To wave, to shake the hand, to give a signal. For those of you who are not watching the video, I just wave my hand like, hi. Yeah, that's one way to do it. To swing a sickle is this word is used of that. It says it is used of a certain sacrificial rite in which parts of the flesh to be offered to God were waved to and fro before they were placed upon the altar. The Levites, in their initiation into office, appear to have been led up and down to scatter, shake forth, use of God sending rain. So one of the things that the Levites would do is this meat that was offered and face toward the, do something like this, and then face toward the west and do the same thing, and same for the north and the south. Just raise it up. And that's literally a wave offering. Whether it was done that way in the time of Moshe is hard to say, but we do know they were doing that in the Second Temple period. Beyond that, everything else is speculatory, but that's probably how it was done back as early as Moshe. It makes sense because they're just, don't ask me why God wanted them to wave the meat, but whatever. God said it, that's what we're going to do. So then it says et haomer. So this is the sheaf. We're saying sheaf, and it bugs me because it's not really in modern English. That's really the wrong word to use. I think we probably should use bundle. Maybe that would make more sense, but then that one doesn't really. I don't know if we have an English word that would really say, because like I said, if you have an apple orchard, you're going to bring your apples in a basket or a gunny sack. And they did have gunny sacks back then. Not exactly what you think of as a gunny sack, but they kind of did. Sackcloth and ashes. A sackcloth was something very similar to gunny sack. So, and they certainly had baskets, but they could have brought it in jars and clay pots. You know, they could have done any of those sort of things. So you have to understand that it's going to be according to what you do. And if you're not a farmer, if you're someone who, a carpenter, a lawyer, whatever, you're going to bring money. And so maybe you put it in a little, bag just to bring it in a bundle. But even then, put a rubber band around the money and it would be a bundle. Although these days with all the electronic stuff, I kind of think we're going to kind of lose that bundle thing. How if you send your money in electronically, can it be waived? I don't know. So then it says lipne, which is two faces, which, as most of you know, that's in the presence of. They didn't say in the presence of or before, the word before. They didn't use that terminology in the Bible. So to translate it as in the presence of or to use the word before, those are the closest English words that we're going to get to this. It's not really an idiom. It's just the way they said that back then. Okay, then it's Yahweh. So it's in the presence of Yahweh or before Yahweh. Because if you're doing it before Yahweh, you're in the presence of Yahweh. So you see how they mean exactly the same thing. Then we have Li Rezon Nechem. So here we have a fairly new word to us. It's literally to, because they added the lamed to the front, to pleasure you. It's your pleasure. So it's in plural, so we probably should say your instead of you. But it's delight, satisfaction, to be pleasing, to be acceptable to God. Of course, it's used in that case. Instead of your pleasure, it's God's pleasure. If you're accepting. But in this sentence, in the use of this word, very specific to our pleasure, not God's, ours. So if it's specifically that which pleases God, in this case, it's specifically that which pleases us, right? Are you guys following that? There's something different about this word. Mi ma charat is our next word, and from tomorrow. Tomorrow's probably the right way to say that. It's literally from tomorrow, so you could use the word after, or tomorrow. Either of those words, depending on how you're going to translate it, are fine. Then this is ha Shabbat. So it's the Sabbath. Nifenu. All right, we're back to that wave. To wave, to shake the hand. Same word. Ha-Kohen. It's for the Kohen to wave. So our translation then, and the Kohen will wave it in the presence of Yahweh. That's that leap day before the face. The Kohen will wave it in the presence of Yahweh to be accepted for you, for your pleasure. Because the idea here is that in you obeying God and God accepting your sacrifice, that's for your pleasure. That should bring you pleasure in knowing that God has accepted your sacrifice. Of course, then it says the next day on the Sabbath, the Cohen will wave it. So this is going to be done, of course, on the Sabbath. I really thought I had more stuff from the sages in here, but I guess that's coming later. I really want to use the sages as much as I can because that's very acceptable in Judaism. The problem I have with it is their lack of knowledge of Hebrew grammar and Hebrew writing style of the biblical period is non-existent. They have no understanding. It's not their fault. It got lost to Judaism. Somewhere between the Second Temple period time, and even by then, it was lost to the masses by then. The writers of the New Testament letters still had a good grasp on it. They were a part of a group called the Hasidim. They called themselves the Hasidim constantly throughout those letters. So they were the Hasidim. The Hasidics is what they're called today. They were nothing like today's Hasidics. But they knew the grammar rules. They wrote in the same style that Moshe wrote in. So they obviously still knew the grammar rules of their time. But somewhere between then, the time of the Second Temple, at the ending of it, of course, the Jews get kicked out of their homeland. The temple gets destroyed. These Jews wind up, hiding in the mountains for a while. Some went to Pella, some went to Yavne. And then, particularly when you get to the Dark Ages, you've got all these people who have long lost the writings, the knowledge of the writing style, the reasons why things are repeated so often. They don't know any of the grammar, actually. It's not until the time that Casuto comes along, which the 1900s, you're going 60s, 70s, 80s, somewhere in that period. He is, or was, I believe, the world's leading authority on the Ugaritic text. And he compared that to the Torah and discovered that the writing style of the Torah was identical to the Ugaritic style, which makes sense because they're all coming out of Mesopotamia. It's all coming from the same place and time. So it makes sense that this happened. And then the rules of grammar that applied to that Mesopotamian writing style are applied to the Bible as well, to the Hebrew Bible. So we now know what the rules are because of that. Well, this didn't exist when the sages were around. So I get to a point where I can't even use the stuff that they said because they did not knowing the grammar. Everything that they said was completely off base. It was, utterly and completely wrong. And they would spend pages and pages and pages of the Talmud arguing points based on improper understanding. What is that worth? These guys meant well, I'm sure, but they didn't have the information that they needed. The Dead Sea Scrolls had not been found. And you can't imagine how much stuff has been found just since the Dead Sea Scrolls. So we have a better grip of the grammar and the rules now than they had no grip. And we've got a pretty good grip now. I'm not trying to badmouth the sages here. I'm just saying that sometimes I just can't use their work as much as I really want to. All right, so let's see if we can get through verse 12. Very literal. And do them in day, make wave you all, the Omer, lamb, perfect son, year he, burnt offering to Yahweh. So we start off with va'asitem, which is and do them. And this is asa, labor, to work, to make, to manufacture, or just the word dio, just do. Oops. Mouse kind of fell off the thing there, but I got it fixed. So do something, dayom, in a day, that's singular, day. Ha nivchem. So we're back to making the wave offering, the day that you, being in plural, so you all, I don't know else how, really don't know how to say you in plural. Is there a word for you in plural? Anyway, you all is how I'm saying it. This is the day that everyone does that brings their offering for the wave, the priest to make the wave offering. All right, then it says et ha'omer, so the day that you brought the omer of your harvest. Then it says keves, that's the word for lamb. Tamim, oh, so now it's got to be a perfect lamb. Well, what does that mean? Well, it has to be complete. It has to be whole. It has to be without blemish. Does that mean that it can't have, say, polka dots on it? No, it can. The color of the fur and the skin and all that makes no difference. You know, whether it's a solid color or a blotchy, mass of colors, none of that makes any sense. But if it has any oozing sores, if you guys remember, or cuts on it, or broken legs, or poked out eyes, you're not allowed to bring those. Remember those. We've already gone over all of that, so we don't need to go over that here. That's part of the Hebrew grammar rules. Then we have keves, tamim, ben. Which is generally thought of as the word son, but it's ben shanato, so it's son of a year. Son of a year. So it's going to be between 8 days old, if we remember the rules, up to a year old. And it could be argued up to just before it turns 2 years old. I think there could be a pretty solid argument made for that. Don't know if you'd win the argument. Just saying there would be a pretty solid argument for that. But anything, it's got to be pretty young. So then we have le olah, which is for a burnt offering. The olah being the burnt offering, that which is laid on the altar, that's offered on the altar, that's burnt on the altar, or cooked. Shouldn't say burnt, but cooked on the altar. Because we are having a barbecue here. And I'll just say it again because I like to say it. If we would translate sacrifice as barbecue, I think people would be a lot less scared of our religion. So anyway, this is La Yahweh, so it's to or for Yahweh. So here's our translation. You will do this in that day, because remember we're speaking of the day that the wave offering is being made. You will wave the omer sheaf and the unblemished or 1 year old lamb, a olah, a burnt offering to Yahweh. So it's not just that you're bringing that first fruit from your field, because it'll eventually be called that. It's not called that here, but it will be called that. So you're bringing that in the Western world, we think of that as a tithe. You're supposed to pay the first 10% off the top is your tithe, and that is correct teaching. The 10% of the gross, not the net. Anyway, Onkelos's vaYiqra by Drazina Wagner states that this sacrifice is specific to the bringing of the omer and points out that it, speaking of the sacrifice, is not mentioned in Bamidbar. So that must be where I got that earlier thing about Bamidbar. Yeah, it's not mentioned in chapter 28. This sacrifice is separate from the other sacrifices. I'm going to have to call it a day here. I don't have enough time to get through this next one. So, shalom, shalom, everyone.
The blessing, vaYiqra. Yevarecha Yahweh ish merecha. Ya'er Yahweh panai v'lecha v'hunecha. Yisa Yahweh panai v'lecha v'yasim lecha shalom. And in English, may Yahweh cause you to lie down so that you may rest. May he touch and caress you. May he prepare you for what is ahead. May he watch over you. May he keep you from harm. May he cause goodness to grow in you and take away the bad. May he arrange your life and cause you to flourish. May he cheer you up and gladden your heart. May he cause his light to shine through you. May he show you tenderness, favor, and love in his presence. May he show you kindness and be delicate towards you. May he show you his generosity, mercy, compassion, and desire for you as it comes forth from the depths of his soul. May he lift you out of your pit and deliver you from the things that hold you prisoner. May he draw you to his chest and cast his eyes on yours. May he show you his love and desire for you as he cradles you in his arms. May he bear your punishment and pardon you of your sin. May he take you for his bride. May he establish a foundation in you. May he place his name on your heart and mind and make your body his temple. May you be his treasure. May you always be on his mind. May he draw you near and comfort you when you are afraid. May he assure you there is nothing to fear because he is with you. May you and all that concerns you be at peace because he is your friend. Amen.